Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Reggie. I needed to make this little short apology to you guys because when I was filming my video, I have a neighbor who has a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and he just loves to drive around on his motorcycle, and it is as loud as it can possibly be. And of course, he always does that whenever I try to film a video at home. I don't know how he gets the timing so perfect. And also there are a couple of buzzes on my phone because I had some messages come in while I was filming the video. And so rather than just trying to do it over again, I'm just apologizing in advance for the excessive noise. So hopefully you can still enjoy the video and still hear it. And there's also a moment where I have to turn on my fan because it is pretty hot in here. So sorry about that noise as well. But hopefully you guys can still hear well enough. All right, so enjoy the video. Thank you. Bye. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Reggie. I'm an autistic adult, late diagnosed, and I do videos about my life as a late diagnosed autistic adult. I am trying something new today. Last year I bought this $20 tripod on Amazon. I just bumped into it, that's why it shook. And I am trying to see if it's gonna help me so I don't have to hold my phone when I make my videos. So we'll see how it goes. But adjust it a little bit. So if you guys are wondering, if you've seen some of my previous videos, why my couch is a different color. I love couch covers because they're easy to just toss in the wash. So I have 3 or 4 of them, and that's why sometimes when I do video, I'm not actually on a different couch, it's just on a different couch cover. So anyway, today I want to talk about issues that I'm having with therapy. I know that a lot of autistic people do therapy. I'm part of an autistic forum, and I know a lot of people on the forum talk about their therapy, and some of my friends who are autistic, whom I know in real life, also do therapy. I'm going to turn on my fan. I'll be right back. I'm going to pause for a moment. Okay, I don't know if you can hear the fan going in the background. My house does not have AC, so I need to use these little cheap fans, and they can be pretty loud, so hopefully they won't interfere with the video. But anyway, a lot of my, well, I don't have a lot of friends actually, but the few friends that I do have who are autistic, I know that some of them do therapy as well, and on the forum and amongst each other, we have talked a lot about therapy disasters as autistic people. And I want to do this video because I think a lot of people will be able to relate. And I'm hoping that if you guys do relate, we can talk about this, because it's really important that the medical establishment changes and that therapies start to change to be able to meet the needs of the neurodivergent population. So before I tell you guys what I want to tell you, I need to explain a disability that I have that is unique to me. I keep looking at myself here as I'm doing this, and I'm noticing how my eyes are like facing that way. I'm trying to look straight into the phone, but I don't know what I'm doing, so my eyes are just gonna look over there. Anyway, I'm gonna explain this disability, and this is not something that I really talk about publicly. I talk about it to the people who are in my life who need to know. The reason I don't talk about it publicly is that it is an extremely rare condition, and in fact it's so rare that very few medical people and therapists even know it exists. And so when I talk about it, it's very difficult for people to understand what I'm talking about. And then they try to relate, or they think they can relate, and then they try to talk to me as if they can relate, and then it's just too traumatic for me to have those conversations. So I tend to not disclose this. And I'm going to ask you guys in the comments to please be very kind and considerate, and please do not engage me in any kind of argumentative fashion or any kind of not believing me in the comments, because that will cause me an immense amount of trauma, and I don't want to have to be dealing with that kind of trauma on my channel. So just know that what I say is true. It is real. I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form when I talk about this. And you're just gonna have to trust me and believe me on this, even if it's something that seems incredibly outlandish to you or it doesn't make any sense. So the condition that I have does not have a name, and the way to describe it is that I lack the psychological and emotional equivalent of an epidermal layer. So to tell you what that means, if you can imagine what it would happen if a baby were born without skin, that baby would have a lifespan of 0. The moment that baby would be exposed to air or an environment, it would catch an infection and die immediately, because there's no skin to protect the soft tissues, the internal organs, to protect anything that is underneath the skin. So if you can imagine the kind of trauma that would create, the closest example we can get to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Boy in the Bubble. I believe his name was David Vedder. I think that's his name. This was back in the 70s or something, and he was born without an immune system. And now, since him and this one other kid that had the same issue, now when babies are born with that condition, they get an immediate blood transfusion, and then they're able to survive it. But basically, he had to spend his entire life inside of a plastic sterilized bubble, because if he were to step out of that bubble, he would catch an infection and die. And so if you can imagine that, this is kind of like a psychological and emotional version of that. As far as my people have told me, the team of people that work with me, this condition is, of course, so incredibly rare. No one's ever heard of it. Well, not no one, obviously, but very few people have ever heard of it. And it, as far as they know, it is 100% fatal. with a lifespan being early to mid-teen years. And the reason that is because it's at that age that you start to have more social stressors that will cause you to have fatal levels of emotional overload. And so it's not known that it's possible to survive this. And as far as I've been told, they believe I'm the only person to have ever survived into adulthood with this. Of course, we don't know every single person on the planet, obviously, but as far as we know, or the people that work with me, as far as we know, they've never heard of anyone else surviving it. So they don't know how I'm able to survive this. I actually believe in God. I'm not here to push my beliefs on anyone or to try to convert anyone to my beliefs. But I just say that because I truly believe that God has kept me alive for a reason. Whatever that reason is, it is what it is. But I truly believe that my life has been spared, not of my own doing, but because God has chosen to use me for something. So that's where we are with this. So to describe what can happen with this disability is when I experience an emotional situation or psychological situation, like let's say someone says something to me, even if they intend to be mean or they don't intend to be mean, or they say something negative to me that might be, even not intentional, I have no ability to protect myself from it. I have no ability to shield the impact. I have no ability to blow it off. I have no ability to block it. I have no ability to dampen the impact. So every single thing like that, to kind of make an analogy, I will experience it at the emotional intensity of like a tsunami or an avalanche. So it's intense. And some of the things that I have experienced, the intensity at which I experience these emotional impacts are literally fatal levels of intensity where people would very reasonably die from the absolute intensity, or where their minds might snap and be completely damaged permanently. This is why my doctors have a hard time understanding how I managed to survive, and this is why I believe that it's by the grace of God that I'm alive. I also, not having that that emotional shield or emotional protection or psychological shield also means I don't have any kind of dampening protection or any kind of shielding against reliving traumas through PTSD. And I also don't release the traumas. In fact, one of my old therapists, she and I had talked about somatic exercises, to possibly try to release some of the traumas, and we decided that that would be too dangerous because not having the protection could actually cause a release, an attempt of releasing the trauma to actually be fatal. So I relive every time I experience something that is associated to a past psychological or emotional trauma. I relive every trauma that my brain will bring back up in the moment, and I have no protection from reliving the intensity of that. So you can imagine and the more trauma I accumulate, the higher that pile gets, and the more I have to relive, and the more intense it is. And it's just, it's just a big mountain of insanity as far as intensity of emotional levels. So the reason I say this, and the reason I'm sharing this with you guys, is that in order to survive this condition, and I've been having to survive it for quite a few decades now. I am 57. Oh, I just bumped my tripod. Let me move my foot off that thing there. So I've been living with this for a few decades. The coping strategies, the survival mechanisms I have had to intuitively create that work for me are truly mind-blowing. In fact, when I was talking to my neuropsychologist who originally diagnosed me with autism almost 10 years ago, and I was explaining to him some of the stuff that I go through, his jaw literally dropped. I've never seen that happen before, where someone's jaw just literally drops. And he started apologizing to me, and I was like, what are you apologizing for? And he was like, well, I know that it's my job to teach you strategies and coping mechanisms, but I can't. I can't. I have no concept of what you even go through. I don't even understand. Your coping strategies are so sophisticated to be able to go through what you go through. I have no ability. I can't even conceptualize them. And this is something that, it just is what it is. If you're going to survive that kind of intensity of stuff that you go through on a regular basis, and I mean, sometimes it can be on a near daily basis, your strategies and techniques of survival have to be sophisticated enough to be able to do that. So, and this isn't stuff that I learned from a therapist. This is just stuff that my brain had to intuitively develop from early childhood if I was going to stay alive. And so it just did. And so a lot of these techniques that I intuitively learned just as a survival mechanism, they are very complex and sophisticated versions of things that are taught in DBT therapy. So it's kind of like the DBT skills on steroids. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is that just recently I lost my therapist. I had a phenomenal therapist. I mean, I adored her. And the thing that I loved the most about her is that she didn't have an agenda. And she understood that she didn't need to fix me. She didn't need to teach me stuff. She understood that what I need in a therapist is someone to just be able to talk to and just be able to have these deep, intense conversations with as I process the things that are happening to me. Not for someone to try to teach me how to get through them and process them, because the stuff that I go through, it's not stuff that a lot of therapists even understand. But just to have someone whom I can talk to out loud and share my experiences with, so that I can process them better, more easily, and just to have someone that is going to validate me and allow me to have these super intense analytical, deep conversations, because I can't have these conversations with the regular people because they're just too intense. They literally will overwhelm people. So that is what I use therapy for. The problem is that the way that therapy is set up, if you don't have a goal that you're working on where the therapist is helping you fix something in your life or overcome something in your life, they can't really bill insurance for that. So that becomes a problem, because for someone like me, I don't need a therapist to help me deal with my issues. I need a therapist to basically just allow me a space where I can air stuff out, and that helps me in my own processing. But they can't really bill for that. And so that causes a problem. So the reason that I wanted to make this video is because I think a lot of autistic people might be in a similar situation where, okay, let me see if I can rephrase this. So I know that a lot of autistic people have mental health issues. I understand that. I respect that. I mean, it's just true. It's just the way it is. One of the videos I was watching in my research stated that there was a study done that said 85% of high-functioning autistic people, and I say that in quotes because, you know, we don't like functioning labels, but for lack of a better word, I'll just say that, or, you know, low support needs. I actually don't even like that either, but that's another video. But the study, and I don't actually know the study myself, I just heard that on the video, that the webinar that I was watching. She said that the study said that 85%, they showed 85% of autistic people have mental health issues. And that is understandable, extremely understandable. And so a lot of therapists will assume, and a lot of medical, people will assume that just because you're autistic, you automatically have anxiety disorder, you automatically have depressive disorder or whatever. And they forget that, yeah, 85% of people have them, but that also means that 15% of people do not. And so if you happen to be somebody who doesn't have those struggles, and you need therapy for something other than those struggles, oftentimes the therapist doesn't know what to do with you. And the therapist can't bill for the insurance, and the therapist can't do this and can't do that. They don't know they can't figure out what to do. And so you kind of get in a situation where if you don't have a therapist who's super creative and who's like, okay, I'm going to, just write in a report, just whatever goals, and they can be really creative on how to write those insurance reports, they're not going to work with you. And fortunately, I've had therapists in the past who are able to have that kind of creativity, and they're not lying. They're just saying things kind of in a vague kind of way so that the insurance will accept it. And the things that they're saying are actually true. They're just not as specific as, other people might want them to be. So that's an issue. So the other issue is that because people are so conditioned to think that every single autistic person has to struggle with depressive disorder, has to have anxiety disorder, a lot of times they try to convince you that you have those things when you actually don't. And I'm going to explain to you, people say to me, oh, you're so arrogant because you think you don't have those things. Well, it's not arrogance. It's just reality. Do I ever get depressed? Of course I do. Do I ever get anxious? Of course I do. But the reasons why I might get depressed or anxious are not because I have depressive disorder or anxiety disorder. The reason I might get depressed or anxious is because I tend to get bullied a lot. I tend to get socially abused a lot. And an anxious reaction to bullying or to social abuse, or a depressed reaction to bullying or social abuse, that's just a normal reaction. That if you didn't react like that, there would be something wrong with you. If somebody was bullying you and you didn't have a reaction like that, I'd wonder what your problem would be, or what your problem was. And so whenever I get anxious or whenever I get depressed, it's reactive. And that's just me. I don't have a problem with mental illnesses. I 100% believe that they're real and people have them, and I support people in them. And I think, if you have a mental illness, I support you. I believe you. I do whatever you need to do. If you need to take medication or whatever you do, I support you in that. But that doesn't mean that everyone has to have a mental illness. And I think a lot of the thought is that if you are autistic, you have a mental illness. I actually had a visit to the emergency room a few years ago because I have a heart arrhythmia. My heart arrhythmia is something I was born with. It runs in my father's family. And it has nothing to do with anxiety or anything like that. It's just, my heart has a premature contraction when I am at rest. And so if the heart arrhythmia kind of acts up, I go to the hospital just to get an EKG, just to make sure that, everything's cool and fine, and it usually always is. And I had to go one time for that, and I went and I got the EKG done. And as the doctor was handing me the summary of the incident, and this incident I'll talk about in another video when I talk about my issues with medical practice. That's a whole different video. But he handed me back the summary, and it said anxiety disorder on it. And I said, wait a minute, why are you giving me an anxiety disorder? First of all, you did not do a psych evaluation. You're not even a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You never even talked to me about anything. Barely said hello to me. But yet you're giving me this diagnosis. And he literally said to me, well, I know you're autistic. People so my video did something weird, but I'm gonna keep going. So he literally said to me, I know you're autistic, and because autistic people struggle with anxiety, I am giving you a diagnosis of anxiety disorder. I was like, wow, okay. We're not having that. So now, years later, I noticed that still on my chart, and I'm fighting to get it off. But anyway, so I don't know about other people's experiences, but I've literally been given mental health disorder diagnoses like that, where a doctor basically never did an evaluation, never talked to me about anything, but because I'm autistic, decided that I have to have these mental disorders as well. Now, I have had very, very thorough neuropsych evaluations. I just had one done this year, and it took literally an entire year to do it. And I've never in my life ever been given a mental health disorder diagnosis or a psychiatric disorder diagnosis. It's just not who I am. So when I go to a therapist and that therapist automatically assumes that I need help with anxiety disorder or with depressive disorder. And then I try to tell them that no, I actually, that's not why I'm coming to them. Sometimes they have a difficult time believing me and they try to convince me otherwise. And I believe that a lot of autistic people are going through similar things. Where I know some people on my forum, we've had a conversation where the psychologist was trying to convince the person that she was bipolar. And she's not. And so I think it's really important when we talk about therapy that when we're talking about therapy for neurodivergent people, we have to be very vigilant. We have to be very strong and put our feet down and say, look, we are here for the reason we are here. Now, if you are here for anxiety and depression, that's fine. That's great. But if you're not, and the therapist is trying to convince you that you have something that you don't, you have to have the self-awareness to be able to not accept that. Because what happens is, if you get convinced that you have something that you don't have, then they start treating you, and the treatment is completely ineffective, and the treatment itself can be extremely traumatizing. And I was even watching a video that was talking about the having to help autistic people deal with the trauma that therapists did to them because of treating them incorrectly, because they tried to convince them that they had something that they didn't have. Now, in a lot of my videos, I talk about being self-aware. And I think as an autistic person or a neurodivergent person, your best asset, your most important thing you can possibly do is to be as self-aware and as honest about yourself as you possibly can. Because when you are going to a therapist or to a medical practitioner, it is super important that your diagnosis is correct and that your treatment is correct. Because if they try to treat you for something that you don't have, the consequences of that can be great. And then if they miss something that you do have, the consequences of that can also be great. So I guess the point of this video is just to share how we have to be really careful, and we have to be very proactive in vetting a therapist, in vetting a practitioner, making sure that we understand ourselves, we understand exactly what we need and exactly what we are there for, and making sure that they understand that as well. So I'm still searching for a new therapist, since the one I just had that I loved is no longer, for her own personal reasons, she's no longer working with me. And it's been really, really difficult. I haven't found anyone because my situation is very rare, it's very unique, and it's not something that most therapists really understand. So I just have to keep looking until I can find someone who can meet my needs. So that's my last point. Don't just settle. Don't just settle for someone who says, yeah, I have autistic children in my practice, or I deal with autistic people. Make sure that therapist really can meet your specific needs, and be incredibly specific, because your well-being, your mental health, your ability to stay intact mentally can really be affected on how good your therapist is for you specifically. So if you have any comments, your own stories that you'd like to share, please share them below. I would love to hear from you guys. And yeah, if I do find a therapist, I will let you guys know. Well, thank you again for supporting my channel, and hopefully this helped you. It might have been a little bit of a rant for me, but thank you for listening anyway. And again, like I said in the beginning, please do not comment really about the medical condition that I have, because it can be very traumatizing for me to have conversations about it with people if they don't truly understand it deeply, and I don't want that further trauma. So just be respectful of that and considerate of that. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Please like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.